Clare Daly, you have 15 minutes or 16 minutes.
Minister, yesterday we were told that the Defence Forces would get 18.5 million extra in current expenditure in budget 2019. 18.5 million to deal with pay, to deal with training, to deal with retention strategies, HR strategies, and all of the things that are so desperately needed to stop the hemorrhaging of trained staff from our defence forces. And I really have to ask myself, what planet are you living on? Did you notice the dignified gathering of retired and current Defence Forces personnel who assembled outside here last month? The people who highlighted the fact that there are people in our naval forces sleeping on boats because they can't afford accommodation, that army families are reliant on FIS because they can't put a roof over their head or a meal on their table while their husband or wife goes out to serve this country. And, you know, it's not as if you don't have the money, because in the same budget that you gave a paltry 18 million to deal with those issues, you're given 29 million to deal with capital expenditure in our defence forces. In each year, not only that, between 2019 and 2021, capital expenditure is going to go up, while current expenditure on our defence forces is going to remain static, and static at a level that is incredibly lower than the wood put forward in the depths of austerity in 2013. And I really have to ask what is going on. I mean, I tried to put some of these issues to the Taoiseach last week. That wasn't the case of all of the money going on toys for big boys, because that's actually what this budget is. You're putting 250 million of the capital budget into a naval new vessel for the Navy when you've got nobody to crew it, when morale in our naval forces are absolutely on the knees. It is absolutely ridiculous. And when I tried to put it to the Taoiseach last week that actually there's a meltdown in our naval service, that you're moving away from the core values of what that Navy was set up for, which was maritime defences and sea fisheries. And I have to say, if I was a member of the naval service, a naval service where morale is already on the floor, I would have been absolutely gutted by the reply of the Taoiseach last week to dismiss and even laugh at what has been long established as the core principle of the Navy, which is maritime defence and fisheries protection. And instead, in trying to answer me, he lauded Operation Sophia. We have a naval service of 1,094 members. 54 members are involved in Operation Sophia. So I think that the 95% of naval service members would have been surprised at the response of the Taoiseach in leaders' questions last week, that the work that they do is actually, in his opinion, secondary or somehow less important than the work done in the Mediterranean. I think they'd be particularly confused in the context that the White Paper on Defence, produced ironically when he was the Minister for Defence, describes fisheries protection as the day-to-day tasking of the naval service, with secondary roles including, and I quote, to provide general maritime patrolling, being in a position to respond to, for an example, an aid to the civil power request, a pollution incident or a search and rescue or recovery mission. No mention at all of military operations in the Mediterranean. And I really say it appears to me that the Taoiseach doesn't understand what the Navy does, or, even more sinister, that a decision has been taken to change the role of the Navy without any intervention with the naval service men and women, or indeed with this House, because it smacks to me that he's been listening to people who talk about us having the best little Navy in the world, while at the same time belying the reality on the ground. Because Operation Sophia, for starters, is not a humanitarian mission. In actual fact, if you read the wording in the establishment of the operation, they talk about the Union shall conduct a military crisis management operation contributing to the disruption of the business model of human smuggling and trafficking networks in the southern central Mediterranean. The fact that it's a military crisis management operation, it's not a humanitarian mission. In fact, when we moved the resolution in this House, the Dáil was sought to approve the redeployment of naval service vessels from humanitarian search and rescue operations to security and inception operations. So therefore, for the Taoiseach to come back and say that the work of our naval forces in protecting our coastal waters and protecting our fisheries was somehow subsidiary, I found quite shocking. And what was more shocking was the fact that he said, in complete and utter contrast to the reality of the situation, that no ship will go to sea if there are safety issues for the crew, ignoring the reality today that it's precisely because ships are going to sea with safety issues for the crew that these issues have now, for the first time in naval history, entered the public domain. The fact that ships have not been going out, not being capable of being crewed to go out to police our waters. And this is not a green over blue conflict or anything like that. It's a recognition of the fact that actually not only are ships not going out, but just the other day a ship was sent out to sea even though it had scaffolding around its engine. Scaffolding that was put in place during maintenance work on the engine and not removed, which blocked an emergency exit and ended up injuring 2 seamen. It's a fact that there is a devastating shortage of trained Navy personnel. So while the Taoiseach might answer me and say that staffing is at 92% levels, I can assure you that that is utter nonsense, because not all naval personnel are equal. And sending ships out to sea with people who've never been on a ship before, but counting them to make up the minimum numbers, is not securing the safety of our naval personnel. The shortage of able seamen has got so bad that now what you've done to deal with it, or rather what the higher naval command have done to deal with it, is rather than addressing and being honest about the shortage as a result of the appalling working conditions that naval personnel are subjected to, rather than calling that what it is, ye simply renamed an ordinary seaman, who's basically an apprentice seaman, in some instances somebody who's never maybe even set foot on a ship, and called them an able seaman PQ, partly qualified, and presto, you put somebody on a boat, you put them out to sea, you anchor down, and you don't actually do anything other than perpetuate a myth that we have a naval service in this state, because the men and women at the front line are telling you that they do not. Their lives and their working conditions have been undermined to such an extent that for the first time in the history of this state, we do not have a naval service, and nothing in the budget has gone to address that. The situation is absolutely critical. And the point I tried to make to the Taoiseach last week, which was actually ignored, and the problem has been accentuated by your budgetary decisions here, is that the issues are not just about pay. Of course pay is important, and we know our Defence Forces personnel need more funding. Of course they do. But there's a lot more at stake here. It's about chaos, mismanagement, cover-up and denial. That's the root of the crisis in the Naval Service, and the chaotic mismanagement was on full display last week when a directive came down from the officer in charge, Personnel Management Section, abolishing the 72-hour notice that applies before sailors go out on duty, before then being hastily rescinded. Now, the word is now out that the 2 years at sea, 2 years ashore module or whatever that has been applied throughout a history of our naval services might be abolished, to be replaced with a 3 years at sea and a 1 years ashore model. Now, this is a rumour, but how would you feel as somebody, a man or a woman, working in our naval services with that type of attitude hanging over your head? Is it any wonder that people are leaving in droves? When you return from a tour of duty, to your ship thinking you're going to be reunited with your family, to be told, sorry, you're going to be press ganged out on another ship just to give the illusion that we have enough people to cover our bases. It's an absolute disgrace. Who would stay in a job like that? And to say that it's an issue of pay is simply denigrating the crisis that is actually there. And it's all to do with these men and women would put all shores to the wind if there was a crisis attacking this state. But you know what they're being asked to do it for? To keep up an appearance that we have a naval service, while you actually ignore the systemic crisis that exists there. And if it's bad enough for men, I have to say for women it's even worse. Why would you stay in such a family-unfriendly environment like that, in a job where they discover a spy hole in your shower room and something that management don't even bother to tell you about after it's been discovered? A job where no woman in 25 years has been promoted to Chief Petty Officer? Who would stay in a job like that when nobody in power even seems to admit the problems that are there, let alone solve them? It's absolutely catastrophic. And I'm really saying that this budget has been a failure to address what should have been and what is a wake-up call for you. And you know what? When you wake up, it's going to be too late. Because you can't replace personnel who've been trained for 3, 4 and 5 years, that expertise that is just going to be washed down the drain and handed over to a new recruit. It doesn't happen like that, and our naval services are hanging on a thread, and shame on those in authority in our defence forces that they have not articulated the desire of their members, because while they've reinvented themselves now somehow as champions of the pay and conditions of defence forces personnel, the reality is it's that their choices of furthering prestige projects to cosy up to the big boys in the EU has actually been the consequence, which has led to the personnel on the front line being the collateral damage in that situation. And I think it's a terrible missed opportunity in this budget. The last points I wanted to address really was the other subject, which was the issue of pensions. And Ireland is currently on track to have the highest pension age in the OECD in 2028 at 68 years. This increase was a unilateral decision taken by Fine Gael and Labour at the behest of the Troika, and on top of that there are now plans to change how people qualify for a pension from 2020. The issue of home carers has not been addressed. Actually, what you've attempted to do by changing the configuration and the total contributions approach to 40 compared to 30 years under the 2010 National Pensions Framework, there was a public consultation about these changes which was an absolute joke. The document that you published was riddled with miscalculations. You've had to admit that in PQ responses to me. You've elicited public opinion through a Survey Monkey formula. That's something like that secondary school students use in their projects. You know, if you want to compare the responses that you got for this misnamed consultation carried out over the summer, you got 270 responses. There were 16,000 responses in the consultation in relation to personal possession of drugs. So let's be clear now, there wasn't a proper consultation, and what's being proposed is very different than what was proposed back in 2010. And they're just going to kick the problems down the road, because while they're giving the illusion of dealing with the home carers credit, which they don't do, they're going to make the situation far worse. People who left the workplace because of unemployment or because of periods of illness. And it's absolutely critical that the public have an opportunity to engage on this. And that's on the state pension side of things. I'm beginning to wonder, do you hate people who are getting older? And as somebody in that bracket, I'm starting to get a little bit scared now, because on the other corner, not alone do you have that, but you have the current consultation on the government's proposed auto-enrolment pension system. And the core principle of that is that everybody is encouraged to achieve pension adequacy, a retirement income of about 60% of their pre-retirement income. Now, that's a very good idea. idea, obviously. Everybody would go along with that. But what ye want to do to achieve it is first by forcing people into a position to hand over a portion of their salary to private, not public, private defined benefit or contribution pension schemes without their consent and with no opt-out at all in the first 7 months, and then added on to that by lobbing a state subsidy at private pension funds on top of that, because the auto-enrolment tells us that every employee is forced to donate 1% of their salary to a private pension for a minimum of 7 months, whether they want to or not. If they want to opt out, if they want to stay in, they can increase that to 6%, and the government will add an incentive. They suggest €1 to the private pension for every €3 the person puts in. So in other words, if you look at it, someone who's on 25,000 will get €83 from the government, while somebody on 70,000 is going to get €233. Essentially, the lower paid worker is subsidising the higher paid one. Not alone on that, you're going to incentivise people if they contribute the equivalent of additional 2% of their salary. So somebody earning 200,000 would get about 4,700 in a state subsidy, paid for in part, let's not forget, by the low-paid workers who can't afford to make extra voluntary contributions. It's absolutely appalling situation, and it is feathering the nest of the private pension industry, which already massively benefits from the fact that higher paid workers get so much more in tax relief than ordinary paid workers. It is a continuation of everything that this government has stood for, a Robin Hood in reverse, feathering the nests of those with more resources at the expense of those with less. It's an absolute disgrace, and the consultation must be extended on that.
Thank you, Deputy.